long-term care. Thank you. I'd like to call to, good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call to order this long-term care redevelopment planning task force meeting of Monday, of March 26, 2025. And with that, I will put out a call if there is any declaration of interest. Any declaration of interest? I'm not seeing any virtual hands go up, so that means that we'll be able to move on to our items for discussion and direction. So the first that we have at the top of the list is item 3A, which is a project update, and we have Mr. Rodriguez here from Colliers to provide us with that update. So good afternoon and welcome, and the clerk will be able to facilitate with your slide deck.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm just going to share my screen here, and I believe you'll have a copy of this in advance, and I'll go through the different slides. Can everyone see on your end?
Yes, looks good. Thank you.
Okay, great. So hi, everyone. Today I'm going to provide a brief overview in terms of a schedule update, looking at the tasks that were completed over the previous period since our last update late last year, and some of the key project milestones that are planned for this year. I'll provide a brief financial update, and then we'll hand over to Rob just to provide an update to the group in terms of communications and some recent video footage that was taken for the project. In terms of overall schedule, our reporting with the Ministry of Long-Term Care and forecast remains to deliver the project in January 2027. So we continue to communicate on a monthly basis with the ministry assigned project manager, keeping them apprised of progress, percentage certified by the prime consultant, as well as the forecasted completion date. We also prepare on behalf of Grey County a report that goes to Infrastructure Ontario, providing an update on the cost forecast on schedule and overall project status report that goes to Infrastructure Ontario. And as I go through the financing update, I'll provide more of an update in terms of when the timing is anticipated for the first construction loan or the construction draw. Some of the activities that will further advance this year has to do with the furniture and equipment planning and procurement, as well as operational readiness. Certainly towards the second half of this year, we're looking to set up an introductory or a kickoff meeting just to go over the work plan, roles, and expectations as the team gears up at Rockwood Terrace to support the occupancy plan, which needs to be submitted to the ministry well ahead of the January 2027 date, that there's a plan in place and that all parties are clear on who's collecting the information and how it comes together, as that is a key document that needs to go to the ministry and requires their approval before a first resident date. The next slide over here, I won't cover all these bullets one by one. What I want to do is go to the next slide where there's some photos, because it really tells more of a picture than just going through these bullets. But I will flag over here that construction, the 14.4% complete, is as of the end of February and not the end of March. So actual progress on site as of today would be higher than that number. And as I mentioned at the bottom, we have an ongoing communication and channels with the Ministry of Long-Term Care and Infrastructure Ontario for this project. So here's a couple of photos that show on the top left-hand side was taken in November 2024, and on the bottom was taken in March. So the slab on grade and the underground services have been completed since the last reporting period. And what you see is a lot of advancement. So these photos are oriented, they're rotated 90 degrees. So if you're looking on top, we're looking west. So a lot of advancement along the east, the south, and the west wings in terms of structural steel erection, masonry. Some of the masonry activities have started on the second level right now. And you can see in this photograph here the hollow core slab that's been installed. Some of the masonry and the structural steel erection now is focused on the south wing. So that's ongoing, as well as the electromechanical works. That's the electrical and mechanical services and the rough-ins, making sure that the outlets are at the correct location as per the design. There are mock-ups that are planned for this year. And I would have mentioned this previously, but just to refresh the group, the intent with the mock-up is before these rooms are replicated multiple times, there's an opportunity for the staff at Rockwood Terrace, the design team, to go and verify the exact location and heights of mechanical and electrical devices and outlets. And there's a formal sign-off process to ensure that that's communicated with the construction team and signed off and reviewed before they replicate it. So that's ongoing and part of the schedule, and really an important piece of the quality assurance program for this project. Here's some additional photos. So the top left shows one of those precast hollow core panels. Bottom left showing structural steel erection. Snow clearing was done by JT Excavating, so that was a big effort over the past few months, and has gone quite well. Recent feedback we've received is, given the volume of snow and water, the site has been draining quite well and not fully saturated. So certainly speak to some of the pre-grading work that was done, and having JT Excavating continue as the subcontractor and helping with some of these ancillary services or snow clearing. In terms of project financial update, similar to the last update in November, we are forecasting a $0 forecasted variance at completion. So still trending quite favorably from a financial standpoint. To date, 8 change orders have been executed for slightly under $53,000 in total. As a general metric, that corresponds to around 1.3% of the post-contract contingency, which is part of the overall project budget. And a general tracker is to look at how this compares to percentage progress for the project. So the 1.3 is well within the 14.4%. And from a financial standpoint, the project is trending quite favorably at this stage. There's one point I wanted to bring up here, which has to do with the risk and the impact on potential tariffs for the project. And I did want to reassure the task force that we have been in discussion with Grey County's legal counsel or legal representative for this project, and have come up with a framework so that if there are any mentions of tariffs or increasing costs, it's a framework that puts the onus on the contractor to look at, really identify what is the impact in terms of not only passing on the tariff, but looking at what's the impact in terms of material, equipment, part, demonstrating what was allowed for at the time of tender versus how these items are being impacted, and showing evidence of what is the contract between the contractor and any of their suppliers or subs, as well as looking at what options may be available to mitigate this impact. So we have formally communicated that 7-point framework with the contractor, and to date remain available to evaluate any potential impacts, but we haven't heard anything formally submitted that has met this yet. But we do have a framework in place that helps us mitigate some of these risks, and quite honestly avoid a scenario where there's a tariff and it's being fully passed on to the owner without understanding specifically what the impacts are and are there opportunities to mitigate this risk. From a cash flow standpoint, we continue to obtain recurring updates from the contractor based on their progress on site and forecasted progress and cash flow progress payments moving forward. We do expect the pace to pick up around the April-May timeframe, and the winter was a slower rate of progress that was anticipated and built into the schedule. But as the work ramps up, so will the monthly payments that are certified and that go to the contractor. And we are forecasting that sometime towards the end of spring, early summer would be when the first draw would be required with Infrastructure Ontario for the construction loan. Before I hand over to Rob for the communications update, I'll just pause here, and I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any in relation to the update I provided.
Thank you. I do see some hands up, so we'll begin with Deputy Warden Milne.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the update. Very good report. I just wondered what the nature of the change orders were, and did we do we anticipate, well, I'm sure we do anticipate more, but what was the nature of the change orders to date?
Yeah, some of them were one of them was a credit, so revising plumbing fixtures to and that resulted in a net credit to the owner. The bulk of the changes were associated with revising the height of the footings to as there was quite a lot of congestion with underground services and making sure there was sufficient space for installation. There has been some coordination with between structural and the hollow core slabs. So some of it is coordination between the disciplines. And we do expect some moving forward. Some of them will be credits, some of them will be extras, but overall, it's within what we would expect for this type of design bid build model and the typical items that come up between disciplines, be it coordination with shop drawings or coordination between sub-consultants.
Excellent. Thank you for that. We'll take the credits, but send the others to Wes Gray. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have a question from Councillor McKay.
Yes, thank you for the report. Just wondering, would you have any idea whatsoever of the percentage of product that would have to come from the US?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We have been in discussions with the contract to get a better sense in terms of which products or which material or equipment. In some cases, they are complex supply chains, so there may be parts or pieces of an equipment that's coming from China or coming from the States, not the entire product. So we are working through with the contractor now to get a better understanding as they go through the shop drawing process where all of the items are coming from, and if there have multiple parts or components, a better understanding of the overall supply chain for a given product or equipment. I will note that some of the elements in the photos, the precast slabs and structural steel, are locally coming locally from within Ontario. So that was a question that had come up, and those are local items.
Okay, thank you. And I don't see any further hands at this point in time. So, oh, yes, there we go. We'll go over to Councillor Greg.
Thank you, Ward. And it takes me a second to figure out the buttons here in my view screen. I do have a question. Thanks for the update, Andrew. Can we also get your comment about our savings potentially if the carbon tax is abolished? I know Paul's probably nodding in agreement. He's always on top of the carbon tax item. And we've got two federal candidates right now who have essentially promised to do just that. And I'd just like to hear from you. Have you got any line of sight in terms of ensuring that a carbon tax reduction is passed along in savings in the project? I don't want to see there be opportunity for parties to be able to just take that intended savings and not pass it along.
Yeah, it's a really good point. We haven't had detailed discussions with the contractor about that point yet, but we're happy to flag it as an opportunity. And I would see a similar framework to the tariffs that we're using. We could use that exact same framework and apply it to any benefits from tax credits. It goes both ways. So I'd like to bring that back to the project team and table it to our discussion with the contractor.
Okay, thank you. And I do not see any further hands, so I think we're able then to move on. Then if you'd like to move on, we can go to Mr. Hatton.
Thank you very much. As flagged in the communications plan that was presented to this committee a while ago, this is a little bit of a slow period for the project communications now that we have launched. But just in the past couple of weeks, we have had some more imagery coming from the site that we've been able to use to update the public page, and that we'll be able to use to push through social media as well. I just learned about an opportunity to go to the site this Friday, so I'll be able to get some more footage and things from the ground that we can use. As well, Jen and I are having a a quarterly call with long-term care families tonight, where we'll be able to provide a little bit of a brief update to that target audience, as well about what's been happening on the site. But the biggest update that we do have is some updated drone footage. This came directly from Malul Blamey, and I will just share that with you now. Right, just stop sharing. So not a long clip there, but certainly it gives you a good up close perspective. They're willing to get a lot closer to the action with the drone than we are when we when we go up.
Okay, well, thank you. And yes, although it's short, certainly a picture and a video is worth 1,000 words. So it really does. The way that we can have a peek at what's going on right now is very valuable that way. So thank you. Is there anything else, Mr. Haddon?
Not at this time, no.
Okay, great. Any questions with regards to communications from task force members? Okay, so I'm not seeing any, and so thank you both for your presentations and your updates. And with that, Madam Clerk, are you looking for a motion to receive this update?
No, that's okay. That was just a verbal update from
Okay.
Colliers. Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, thank you again, both. And with that, then we will move on to item 3B, which is the CAORRP 0225 South Street East Downstream Stormwater System Upgrades Cost Share. And the author of that report is Deputy CAO Schertzer. So first of all, we do have a recommended motion. Let's get that on the floor before we look to staff to present the report. So may I ask for a mover and a seconder that the report be received and that Grey County commit to providing an initial financial contribution to West Grey for an upset limit of 1.7 million, including excluding HST over the next 2 years to allow the project to proceed, and that based on the project tender results, an updated cost sharing agreement between the municipality of West Grey and Grey County be prepared for the South Street East project and brought back for council's consideration. May I ask for a mover and a seconder? Thank you. Moved by Councillor Hutchinson and a seconder. Okay, I'll put a second call out. We will need a seconder. Okay, I see Councillor McKay has seconded it. Okay, so thank you. So it's on the floor for discussion at this point in time. So we will look over to the Deputy CAO.
Great, thank you very much. So I'm just going to share my screen here. Just 1 second. Share. Everyone see that?
Yes, thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So good afternoon, everyone. So the purpose of this report is to provide an update on what is called the South Street East project, which includes some proposed storm sewer upgrades, which are required to support the stormwater from the new Rockwood site. As discussed as part of the early works project, the stormwater design for the new Rockwood Terrace requires upgrades to the storm drains under South Street East to manage runoff from both the new site as well as the early works that were done. Task Force may recall the early works project included extending existing roads, including South Street East as well as Rock Street, as well as extending services under those new sections of roads, both to provide access to the existing Rockwood or to the new Rockwood Terrace, as well as to service the new Rockwood Terrace. As part of those early works upgrades, we did upsize some of those pipes to support future development. Those were costs that were shared and were attributed to West Grey's share of that early works project. This particular project ties in with some of those early works. We did a storm sewer drain upgrade along South Street East, recognizing that once these upgrades are completed, we can tie into that storm sewer connection, which would then outlet through to eventually over to Countess Street and out to the Saugeen River. And I'll get into that and I'll show that on a map in a little bit. But I just wanted to provide some context as to why we're even talking about this particular project today. So the existing storm sewer that does exist under South Street East, it's too small and it's too flat to handle the additional flow. So upgrades are needed to handle the increased flow, as well as to prevent further flooding issues that exist along that section today. There was a temporary drainage easement that was negotiated with the landowner to the south, and that was to handle any temporary runoff from the new Rockwood site and the early works. And this is, as noted, is just temporary until such time as those storm sewer upgrades are completed along South Street. As part of the Rockwood Early Works Agreement between West Grey and Grey County, it was agreed that the cost for the downstream storm sewer upgrades would be shared. So West Grey's consultant has investigated options for what those downstream stormwater upgrades could entail. And the most viable and cost-effective option is to replace the existing storm sewer pipe that runs along South Street East between Elgin Street and Countess Street. The consultant for West Grey has prepared design drawings and specifications for what we call the South Street East project. And these include some additional upgrades for road, sidewalks, as well as replacing the existing water main and sanitary sewers, and as well as improving some existing storm sewer connections to that storm drain. Those would all be what's identified as West Grey's cost or West Grey's share of this overall project. The costs associated with the replacement of the storm sewer have currently been identified as Grey County's share of the project costs. And West Grey's consultant has prepared a cost share breakdown of the estimated cost for the project, which in their opinion is fair and equitable. To manage the scale of the overall project, West Grey's consultant is recommending that the project be completed over 2 phases. So part A, or phase 1, would be constructed this year, would cover improvements between Garifraxa Street and Countess Street, and I'll show a map in the next slide. Part B will address the area between Elgin Street and Garifraxa Street. The entire project will be completed by fall of 2026, which aligns with the required timing for the new Rockwood Terrace, as well as the completion of the Early Works Project Phase 2. The estimated cost for Phase A, which is the 2025 costs, the total costs are just over $2 million. West Grey cost share estimate being just over $1 million, and Grey County's estimate being just over $1 million. The 2026 Phase B estimate cost is about $1.8 million, with West Grey's share at $1.15 million, and Grey County's share of that 2026 Phase B would be just over $670,000. The actual cost for the project won't be known until the tender closes and is awarded to the successful contractor by West Grey. So this is a map that shows the areas in question. So the part A in red, that's the section that would be completed as part of the South Street East project in 2025. So that goes from Garifraxa Street, which is also part of Highway 6, and would proceed west to eventually outlet to the Saugeen River. So that's the section that's proposed to be completed this year. The section highlighted in green is the section that would be completed in next year in 2026. Just to provide some context, the yellow site here, that's where the new Rockwood is being built as we speak, as Andrew just provided an update on. And the purple section here is what we identified as the Rockwood Early Works project. So this is where the Rock Street was extended, as well as servicing and utilities were extended along this purple section in order to provide access and services to Rockwood. But as mentioned, they were also designed to provide upgrades, which West Grey's cost for that early works project was to support any upgrades to those sewer pipes and water mains in order to support future development. So that's, as noted, we installed as part of the early works an upgraded storm drain that would drain from what we're calling the west stormwater pond. And so there's an outlet that was already designed and built as part of that, and the storm drain ends currently at Elgin Street South. And as noted, this storm drain in these red and green sections is too small and too flat to be able to connect for a proper outlet. And that's why this storm drain along this section of these two roads needs to be upgraded. And that's what we're calling the South Street East project, which will be West Gray's project. And there will be a cost share breakdown as noted earlier in terms of those particular upgrades. So county staff asked for Rockwood consultants to review the proposed South Street East project to confirm three things. One is whether or not this was the most viable and cost-effective option for the downstream upgrades. Two, that the proposed upgrades would be sufficient to handle the stormwater that will be generated from the new Rockwood site and early works. And three, to ensure that the cost share estimate breakdown, it was fair and equitable. So the Rockwood consultants have confirmed that the proposed upgrades are the most cost-effective option in terms of, and will handle the stormwater from both the new Rockwood site and early works. So those first two items that we asked them to confirm have been confirmed. The review did raise some questions about the cost share breakdown and suggested that Grey County's share appears to be on the high side and could be reduced. We've started some conversations between West Grey and ourselves to resolve some of those questions raised on the cost share breakdown. And following final review comments that will be received, as well as receipt of the actual tender results, staff will discuss further with West Grey to reach an agreement on what we identify as maybe the fair division of costs associated with this project. West Grey staff and their engineering consultant have noted that the downstream storm sewer upgrades along South Street East will require a significant portion of the road to be removed, excavated. And they've also noted that to achieve the right grade from a drainage perspective, the storm sewer needs to be replaced deeper than the existing storm drain. So again, that requires more material and road to be excavated and of course put back, and requires some infrastructure to be removed and replaced as well. In terms of the recommendation next steps based on where we're at with this particular project, the project must be completed by fall 2026. And again, this is in order to align with the timing of when the Rockwood Terrace will be substantially completed, as well as the completion of phase 2 of the early works. The total cost share estimate for the county across the next 2 years is just under 1.7 million, excluding HST. So in order to keep this project moving forward, because as noted, it has to be done, it's recommended that Grey County provide an initial financial commitment of up to 1.7 million, excluding HST, over the next 2 years. And this will be, of course, funded out of the Rockwood Terrace redevelopment project because it's associated with this project. Final cost sharing will be determined after the tender closes and following further discussions with West Grey. And the actual cost share will be included in an updated cost sharing agreement or schedule to the existing cost sharing agreement between West Grey and Grey County, and that will be brought forward to council for future consideration. So at this stage, the recommendation is before you, and we're happy to take any questions that the task force may have.
Okay, thank you. And perhaps Madam Clerk or Deputy CEO, if you could just keep that recommendation in front of us so that we know what it is that we're discussing. Thank you. And we'll begin with Councillor McKay.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Randy. I was glad to hear that this project of 1.7 million, it is included in the full budget of Rockwood. So it isn't like we're spending more than what we proposed for Rockwood when it was completed. Thanks.
Yeah, so through you, thank you for that comment and question. So yes, this would be an expense associated with the overall Rockwood Terrace redevelopment project, and would be funded out of that overall project envelope.
Okay, thank you. And I do see that Director Spicer is on the line as well. And I'll just give a moment in case there's anything else that she would like to add. Okay. Not seeing her hand go up. So we'll carry on with questions. We'll go to Councillor Greg.
Thank you, Warden. And through you, I've got a few questions for you, Randy.
Sure.
The first point I'd like to make is when we look back at that report from a year and a half ago on the first tender of wardens, I found it really vague in terms of the language speaking to the cost that we're seeing here today in this tender consideration. It literally went down to like one sentence. In fact, I had to read the report 4 times to see what it was I was missing. So I have a little bit of frustration here now how we've came to understand now that it's substantially more than that $2.5 million approximately a couple of years ago. But the first questions are, what were our budget assertions on this type of work to date? And I'd like to know what was our assumptions for servicing the site prior to the scope reduction, because we reduced the scope of the project down to 128 beds, and it was originally considered to be much more. And in determining the property, we would have made certain assertions in terms of the capacity at that time. So I'm wondering, what was the assumptions that we made for budget prior to the scope reduction and now after the scope reduction? And how does this now align with where we are today? And then I've got a couple questions afterwards.
Okay, so we'll begin with that, and I'm going to go to CAO Wingrove.
Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, I should say. And Randy, you can jump in here, but as I think I was the one holding the pen on the original report. Hopefully I can provide some clarity there. At the time, the extent of our knowledge was that there would need to be a joint project with West Grey to upgrade their stormwater infrastructure. This was very early days, and West Grey had not undertaken any kind of significant analysis that would have allowed them, I think, to provide a number to us. So the early works $2.5 million that was in that project was completely separate from the work that we're discussing here this afternoon.
Yeah.
As far as the changes to the scope of the project, I'm not an engineer, and maybe Andrew or Rami might be better to answer this, but my sense of things was that we reduced the height of the building, but the stormwater requirements would not have changed substantially because it's the footprint of the building and the need to manage the water that comes from that and is handled around the building that drives the extent of your stormwater management requirements. But hopefully someone else can give a better, more scientific answer than that. Thanks.
Through you, Chair, if I could add some, and as what Kim noted is exactly right. Based on your first question, Councillor Greg, we didn't know the details of what that project would entail. Part of the commitment was to share in the cost of those storm sewer drains, but West Grey had to undertake a detailed design. So they hired a consultant to undertake that design. Draft design works and specs were completed towards the end of last year, and we've received earlier this year what those cost estimates would be for the actual project. So we didn't have those details at that time in terms of what was going to be required. We just knew that a proper outlet was required in order to handle some of the stormwater coming from the new Rockwood site, as well as the early works. Part of your second question, and like Kim said, maybe Andrew and Rami might have some further details associated with this, but I'll try and take a stab at it as well. As any project, there's obviously some estimates that are identified in terms of what are the costs associated with servicing the site, as well as costs to activate the site, to get the site ready for development and actually do the construction. And as part of that, those estimates are reworked and I identified through further detailed design work. So as part of the Casey and design team's work and through EXP, which is their engineering consultant for this project, they worked out the stormwater design details as part of that project. As this task force is aware, there has been some reworks of some of that over the last couple of years. But as Kim noted, the footprint of the overall building hasn't changed from that redesign. The parking areas haven't really changed, and so the surface that's required in order to handle any stormwater that's coming off the site hasn't substantially changed in further detail. But at one point, there was some early versions of stormwater design that would have required significant stormwater ponds even east of the project site. That's through some of those reworks, that's no longer required. But this outlet is still required and remains required as part of this project. So that was something that was identified as part of early on, that was going to be an outlet that was required to support the new Rockwood Terrace. So, but I don't know if Andrew or Rami has anything further to add.
Randy, I agree with what was shared. I would just add that when the decision was made to go from the campus to the LTC only, a lot of these design parameters and working with EXP were further defined and developed afterwards. So there wasn't, I'll say, a scenario A and scenario B fully fleshed out for the campus of care and the LTC. This was the downstream work that happened after. And from a budgeting and planning perspective, this was a little bit of a known unknown when we looked at the risk profile for the project and contingency. And part of that speaks to where this scope can be covered within the upset limit of the project and not increase the overall upset. So just want to emphasize that point as well. But nothing further to add from myself, Randy and Kim.
Okay, thank you to the three of you. So I will then go back to Councillor Greg for the follow-up.
Okay, thanks for that. And I just note sometimes it's better to have too much information as opposed to not enough information. I liked your graph, or not your graph, your chart today, Randy. It showed the phases and the years that the work would get completed. Yep. And I would have found that more helpful if the dates were in the report a year and a half ago. I think it would have provoked more questions at that time, because from memory, I believe what was shown in red was only indicated to be County and West Gray's portion, and the portion in front of about a half dozen homes there on the south side of the street, that was shown to be West Gray. That was kind of the only commentary at that time in that report. So it would have been nice to have had those years, and perhaps more questions could have been asked at that time. And we would have been more prepared for the type of costs that are coming. My next question is, we just in Owen Sound last year completed approximately 1 kilometer of fairly complex road reconstruction right within feet, essentially to 100-foot cavity or ravine. And it was Folsom Works, and we achieved that for about $5.1 million. So I'm just wondering, what is the type of work where there's disagreement between the two parties right now? Because when I put the two tenders, all the work together, it does still strike me as fairly expensive when I contrast that to a project that we just went through and achieved on budget in Owen Sound. We reconstructed a 10% gradient hill, and like I say, a road right adjacent to a deep ravine.
Okay, so I guess I will put that question over to staff. I see Deputy CAO raising his hand.
Yeah, through your chair. Thank you for those questions. Just back to your earlier comment about the years and costs. And again, we didn't have that information at that time in terms of the years and the costs. We knew that roughly what that project was going to entail. And even you're correct. I look back at the map that we identified at that time. We thought the upgrades were going to be required between Elgin Street and Queen Street, roughly. But as noted on this map, those upgrades go from Countess Street as well and all the way to the Saugeen River. So it's a little bit longer than what we anticipated, but that's what's come back through the detailed design in order to have a true proper outlet design to handle not only the stormwater from the new Rockwood site and the early works, but also to address some of the existing drainage issues that are being experienced by West Grey. Again, that being West Grey's share of those costs. So just want to address that point. In terms of the actual cost share estimates, so that's been identified by West Grey's consultants based on their designs and specs and based on what they're seeing in terms of similar types of projects over the last few years. Do we hope that the costs will come in less than that? For sure. So we're hoping that we get some good positive tender results and good competition through that tender process. We won't know until we actually see those tender results. What we're seeing on our road construction projects are that we're seeing some good costs come back from our tenders. And so fingers crossed, we're hoping to also receive similar results as part of this. That's partly why we want to keep this project moving forward. Because it needs to be completed. It needs to be completed by fall 2026 for our project purposes. And also by getting it out as soon as we can from a tender perspective, we're hoping to get some good competitive bids. So that's why we're recommending the current process as it currently stands. And then we'll negotiate and have some further discussions with West Grey about that cost breakdown. So there's no disagreement about necessarily the cost estimates. It's the cost share breakdown where we think there's some further questions and discussions that we have to have.
Okay, so I'll go to a wrap up to Councillor Greig then. Go ahead.
Thanks. And just want to be certain that staff are able to, when the tenders are reviewed, you still have flexibility to evaluate the carbon charge impact should that tax be abolished by future governments. Construction is certainly a heavy user of the carbon tax. So all these documents are full of those assumptions of that tax being in there. And it would be nice to see if those charges or costs get removed, that the taxpayer is able to realize those still through the construction, because the profit margin doesn't change. The profit margin is still going to be a percent applied by the contractors. And this would just be a reduction or a cost that's going to get removed. So hopefully staff will still have that flexibility in the future to evaluate any benefit from the removal of that cost if it should arrive.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Greig. I don't see any further hands up. So, Madam Clerk, if you could just please return to the motion that we have on the floor. I'll just make sure no hands come up. Okay, so again, we are considering what has been moved and seconded of the upset limit of 1.7 million, excluding HST over the next 2 years. And based on the project tender results, an updated cost sharing agreement between the municipality and Grey County for this project would be brought back for council's consideration. Okay, so there we have it. I'm going to then thank you for displaying the motion again. Thank you. I was just going to ask if I could have the full screen so I can see all of the voting members in front of me, and I'm assuming that all the voting members have their cameras on, so you're all on my screen. Okay, so in that case, then I will call the vote. All those in favor, please raise your hand in the picture. That's fine. I can just count that, or your virtual hand as well. So, thank you. Any opposed? And that is carried. Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk, for that. And thank you, task force members. And if we could just return to the agenda, we do have another item. So thank you very much, Deputy CAO Schertzer, for presenting that report and for the additional information that came from the others. And with that, we are able to now move into section B, which is the closed meeting matter. We do have two items there. It's recommended that the Long-Term Care Development Task Force does now go into closed session pursuant to section 239(2) of the Municipal Act 2001 as amended to discuss organizational enhancements. There are two topics. One is personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, and a second one is labor relations or employee negotiations. And we are entering into closed session at 1:48 p.m. May I ask for a mover and a seconder? Thank you. Moved by Councillor McQueen, seconded by Councillor Gregg. Any discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand in the screen. Thank you. And that motion is carried. So we'll give a moment for the recording and I'll look for your go ahead, Madam Clerk.
Proceed.
Okay. Thank you very much. So I can report back that in closed session, we only discuss the matters that were identified moving into closed session. And with that, we move on to item 5, which is other business. Is there any other business? So look, yes, Councillor McQueen.
Just sort of a curious question in the sense of, I think at one time there was a little bit of a report on the repurposing of the old Rockwood Terrace. And I don't know if there's going to be as we move through the progression of the new build, I just wondered if that will be something that will, as we get closer to moving into the new building, a report or more sustainable report will be coming forward with the old building.
Okay, so I'll look to staff for that. Deputy CAO.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Councillor McQueen. So yes, we do anticipate bringing back some further information and a further staff report based on what was previously discussed in terms of potential options. The last update was that there was maybe merit in exploring at least repurposing that building based on the numbers working now. Task Force may recall that prior to that, the numbers weren't kind of adding up to that, and the initial proposal was maybe to demolish it and maybe then look for opportunities to repurpose that overall site. But given construction costs and everything else, the numbers, at least a year and a bit ago, seemed to work. So we want to update those numbers, explore what opportunities would make the most sense from a council perspective in terms of repurposing that. Is that Grey County repurposing that? Is that somebody else repurposing that and offered up through an RFI or an RFP type process? So those are some of the things that we would have to follow up a discussion or a staff report. In terms of the new facilities and operations manager as well, being able to provide that lens and having that expertise to be able to look at it from what makes sense from a building perspective and what are some of those options, I think would also be very, very beneficial and helpful. So yes, so a follow-up staff report will be coming at some point as we get closer to that transition date. I anticipate that might be more either later this year report, early next year in terms of that report.
Well, thank you for that. And I know with all types of housing in need, I think it would be certainly looking at all those options for sure. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Seeing no further hands for other business, the next date for this task force is to be determined depending on the timeline as the project progresses. And with that, we will need a motion to adjourn. May I ask for a mover in a second? We'll have it moved by Councillor McKay, seconded by Councillor McQueen. All those in favor? Thank you. And this meeting of the task force is adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone, for your time this afternoon.
Take care, all.
Thank you.